This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on the Apple Podcast Store, rate the podcast on Spotify, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening. We do have our merchandise store on TeePublic. You can get all of your Graceful Atheist and Secular Grace themed items. The link will be in the show notes. If you are in the middle of doubt, deconstruction, the dark night of the soul, you do not have to go through it alone. Join our private Facebook group, Deconversion Anonymous, and become a part of the community. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. Arlene interviews today's guest, Andy Neal. Andy Neal is a self-described plus-size hiking influencer. He is on Instagram. You can find him at Andy Films Hikes. He is an inspiration to everyone to get outdoors and experience nature. He tells his story of deconstruction, his acceptance of his body, and his joy in nature. Here is Arlene interviewing Andy Neal.
Andy Neal, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Arlene, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you inviting me on the show and just talk about my story.
Yes, I'm excited. I think I just stumbled upon you in my reels one day. Your hiking stuff came up and it was just fantastic. So I started following you, and then one day you just posted, maybe it was a part of the caption, I can't remember, something about just leaving religion. And I was like, wait, there's a whole other story here that I want to know. So
yes, there is.
Well, thank you for being here. And usually we just begin, tell us the spiritual environment or religious environment you grew up in.
Oh, wow. So it's long and complicated. I grew up the son of two disillusioned Baptist preacher kids. So while both my parents were very disillusioned by religion, they never really called it off. So Christmases and Easters, we were always there in church. Always had that pressure from grandparents. You need to get the kids in church. Ended up going to a Christian school, a very, very conservative Christian school in Southern California. That also was big it was weird. It was Southern Baptist, but the pastor at the church that was attached to the school was Pentecostal. So you had a lot of Southern Baptist, very conservative things, but then they would take a whole week off of classes because there was an outfilling of the Holy Spirit, and we needed all the kids in the school to speak in tongues. Crazy stuff that, the Department of Education never found out. It would have been big trouble. So I grew up in that, and then around age of, 11, 12, my mother started getting into drug use, mostly pills, prescription pills, and my parents divorced once California Child Protective Services got involved. And so my dad was like, we need to get the kids back into church. Started going to church really consistently. Age 12 on, we moved from Southern California to Las Vegas, where we joined a huge mega Southern Baptist. It was a mega church, 5,000-6,000 members, 4 or 5 services. And I got very, very involved in the youth group there. And I was there every time the doors were opened. And during this whole time, my family was a wreck, honestly. My mom was in and out of rehab, not able to stay sober. My parents had just divorced. My dad had married someone new. We weren't getting along. And the only family I really had during this whole time was the church, for better or worse. There were positive adults there for me at youth group. So every time there was something, I would be there. Every time there was, a lock-in or whatever, I was in the church. I ended up working in the church my senior year of high school as a janitor, helping clean up after services. It's a big mega church. So it's just clean up all the bulletins in the pews. No, this would take 2 hours because you had to go down 2 miles of pews. No joke. So this was a huge church. And then, right out of high school, I decided, actually during high school, church camps are funny. I had responded to the call to ministry. And even before that is when I had my conversion experience at something called a Choir of the Fire, which is very problematic, that conference. But then I got called in the ministry in high school at church camp. And from that point I'm going to be a pastor. I'm going to be a missionary. And, from age 16 on, that's what I pursued. And right out of high school, went on a mission trip, came back home. My parents, dad and stepmom basically kicked me out of the house. I was on my own, got on my feet real quick. No college, no education. Started working at a First Baptist Church, Las Vegas. Started working there. Quickly went from a youth helper to part-time paid volunteer-ish to their youth pastor at age 19 with no formal theological education, with kids I'm literally pastoring who were a year younger than me. I'm only a year out of high school. That went bad quick and often. I went from a very large Southern Baptist mega church to First Baptist Church, Las Vegas, despite people from the South, a First Baptist, I think huge. No, this is very small, under 500 people. I didn't know the rules about really conservative, small Southern Baptist churches. And at that point, I bounced around. I did that for a while, and then I bounced around different churches, doing children's ministry, worship ministry. I played guitar, which was a result of my youth group days. And really just went full-fledged into full-time ministry. By the time I was 23, I got licensed as a pastor. Met my wife shortly after that, who's from Oregon. She moved to Las Vegas from Oregon to find a job. We met, got married. She had a later in life conversion experience at 19, 20 in college. And things in Las Vegas at that point were very, the economy was crap. This is 2006, 2007. We got married and decided, hey, let's move to Oregon. Moved to Oregon, and I was working at Starbucks, volunteering at churches taking everything they could from me. I was running children's ministry. I was running worship ministry, all volunteer.
Yes.
And then my wife was like, you need to do something with this. So I decided to go to Multnomah Bible College up in Portland. And did that, graduated with a degree of church leadership and ministry. And from there, I went into full-time vocational ministry where I could actually be paid full-time. Worked on the coast as a youth pastor for a while. And then there's a small Baptist church there. Things weren't going great. So I moved back to Oregon with my wife. At that point, we adopted 3 kids from foster care, 2 with special needs. And worked at a non-denominational church here in Southern Oregon. And it was bad. I thought it'd be good because the pastor had tattoos, skinny jeans. Like, okay, this is a cool hip church. They're more to the social justice stuff. I can jive with this. They have a community garden in the back, and it was just this. I tell people it was the same theology I was dealing with before, especially with the LGBTQ community. It was just in tattoos and skinny jeans. That's all it was. At that point, I remember very clearly I was struggling there. My wife was struggling, period. She actually went on staff as a children's director, was struggling. She has a bachelor's and master's degree in education. The pastor was actually younger than me. He was threatened by me and my wife. We were just trying to work with the kids and students. The youth I had coming to my youth group at that church and that happened in my last church too. Not all, but a good amount of LGBTQ students coming and feeling safe there. The elders in the church were getting mad because kids weren't coming on Sunday morning. They'd come to Wednesday night youth group, so they wouldn't come on Sunday morings. And I asked a few of them, why aren't you guys coming on Sunday mornings? Like, we don't feel safe Sunday mornings. Straight up, don't feel safe. Okay, I get that. I get that. And there's tons of stories behind that. But yeah, eventually my wife, we were at dinner at Red Robin here in Medford, Oregon, and she's like, I don't believe in God anymore. I'm like, whoa. What do you mean? And at this point, things were tough with our kids with special needs. We were being told by the church they didn't need therapy. They just need prayed away, which seems to be their answer for everything from being gay to having mental health issues. I
have a question. Did your wife say that, or did you say that?
My wife said that. She said, I don't believe in God anymore. And I'm struggling. I wasn't there. I don't even think I'm still. I wouldn't necessarily call myself an atheist, but she's like, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of this. And I thought, okay, our marriage is over. I can't keep doing this. And
Yep, I understand.
It was just like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And then I was just looking around, like, this isn't right. What's going on isn't right here. This isn't me. It's the same stuff I was dealing with at the Baptist church out on the coast, the Southern Baptist churches. It's just, why am I holding on to this? And through therapy and counseling, I discovered I was holding on to it because during my very traumatic time in my formative years, that was my family. So I had a sense of loyalty there to a fault. Like, I was loyal to this organization, to the church, because they were there for me when no one else was. And so I felt I needed to do the same for the church. I needed to give the church a chance, even though they had screwed me over so many times. And then within the next few months, I had started coming to the same conclusion. I had talked with the leadership. I was like, hey, I want to start transitioning out of youth ministry. At this point, I'm doing youth ministry full-time. I'm doing worship ministry full-time because they fired the worship pastor. So I'm working 60, 70 hours a week for $30,000 a year. So
wow.
it was bad trying to get, things done, trying to keep my family together. They weren't supportive with our adopted kids. So I told them I want to start transitioning out of youth ministry. We need to start looking for another youth minister. I want to focus on the music and technology. I was always the guy on staff like, hey, we need a video made, Andy. Can you make a video? And go get camera equipment, make a video, make it funny, get the youth together, do a skit, put it on screen. And eventually someone actually in the church had said, hey, we're starting a small production company, Andy. Would you like to work 5-10 hours a week for us just to consult, do social media? And I was starving for anything. Like, I can't do church stuff anymore. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So let's keep it on the down low, though. Eventually, the church found out, even though, come to find out later, the guy who asked me actually asked for the elders' permission first, and they used that as leverage against me. Like, wow. Oh, you took another job without our permission. I'm like, no, actually, I've come to find out, permission was asked. And things were getting really bad, and I was trying to slowly transition out and just try to take care of my family. And then one day they're like, "Oh no, you're fired, basically. And here is if you want a severance package, here's a non-disclosure agreement. As far as you're concerned, you are leaving to pursue a career in the entertainment industry, and here's 6 months severance." And at the time, it came to a shock. It was all like boom week. Our lives were turned upside down, and I was like, okay, I signed it. I on one hand, I regret signing because I had to say something that wasn't true. They were firing me. But at the same time, it's like, I need to provide for my family, and they're offering severance, so yeah. I'm going to take it. And so I did, and then I started just working, in the production industry as much as I could locally in Southern Oregon, which isn't really huge. And then decided, you know what, I'm going to go to film school. And literally the day I signed the non-disclosure agreement, I had contacted Southern Oregon University. They had a new film program there, digital cinema. Like, hey, I'm 36 years old. I already have a bachelor's degree. I'd like to meet with some people there about, what would it take to get a second bachelor's degree? Because I didn't really, at that point, I'm realizing my Bible degree is not going to do me a whole lot of good. Even though it was accredited, it is an accredited bachelor's of science. It wasn't going to do me a whole lot of good. I'm like, okay, so I talked with counselors there. I met with the program director. I found out I can do this in 2 years. Just basically take all my prerequisites and just do everything. And went to film school and started working every little thing I could do in production and social media and in Ashland, Oregon, which is an amazing town. I love Ashland so much. And from that point, I was taken from a very religious, Christian evangelical world. Everyone surrounding me was Christian evangelical, to a world of Southern Oregon University, Ashland, Oregon. Ashland, Oregon is home of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the largest repertory theater outside of New York, or on the side of the Mississippi. Southern Oregon University is renowned, a liberal school, constantly being recognized by Advocate Magazine as one of the most LGBTQ friendly schools in the nation in Little Ashland, Oregon. So very, very conservative here. Then I'm plopped into a film program with all kinds of people I have never met. I've never been around before, very diverse. And I'm like, I like them better. Like, this is more this is more me, and just fell in love. And at that point, my wife and I we're going to therapy. We're working through things, and today we're still married 17 years later. Part of me just out of I know so many people who've left their faith, and even their partner and them both left the faith, but they found out how different people they really were, and there wasn't animosity or anything. They're just like, we were both very conservative Christians then, and we've left the faith, and we're different people now, and they didn't stay together. I don't know how we managed to work it out, but we did. And that's not for everybody. I think we were just ultimately compatible on a just interpersonal level. Our faith and our religion isn't what brought us together. So we were able to work things out. And graduated 2019 with a film degree from Southern Oregon University. Been trying to figure out different ways to tell this story of mine, tell story of those who have left their faith. I was working on a documentary for a while, did a few short documentaries about that. Got involved with the ex-evangelical groups for a while on Twitter. That was that realm. Well, Twitter now is toxic, but that realm of the internet was very toxic for a while. And just trying to find my footing until I discovered the outdoors at the behest of my therapist. I was literally talking to my therapist about just having existential dread and struggle, and not having something bigger than myself to rely on. My whole life, I could just, something bad was happening. Well, I could depend on Jesus, or there's a plan, or this bad thing's happening. It's because of sin. I'm like, I just feel like there's this big hole in my life. And she said, go for a hike, go into the outdoors. We're in one of the most beautiful places in the world. I did, and instantly fell in love with hiking, and it just became my thing. And I just started posting about it, and started realizing I'm a plus size person. I'm a person in a bigger body. Realizing, more serious I got into hiking. Oh, there's not backpacks that fit me. There's not clothes that fit me. Oh, here's one company, Columbia Sportswear. They do it. So I just start buying their stuff and just tagging them. And then eventually Columbia reaches out. I have maybe 4,000 followers on Instagram. Hey, you'd love to come to do some modeling for us. And other companies start reaching out. And then slowly I just start building this platform. And then one day I went viral, going for a stupid hike for my stupid mental health.
I think that's what I saw. I think that's what I first saw of yours.
Yeah. 37 million views, and I've had, over a dozen more videos go viral since then. And this is what I do full time. I advocate for people to get in the outdoors for their mental health, advocate for the plus size and body positive or body confidence community. And I do post often about me leaving my faith. I was very vocal about, while I was at university, I was very vocal about it, and almost very bitter and mad about the church. And I just found out, that wasn't doing me a whole lot of good. And surrounding myself with a bunch of people who were also mad and angry wasn't doing me personally a lot of good. And so I really toned back, my vitriol towards the church, even though it's deserved. I was deeply hurt and scarred by the church, but for me, dwelling on that just wasn't positive. So when I stood back and got into the outdoors, I discovered a new side of myself I didn't know existed. Now, whenever I share about, about my former faith and my former career, I try to be as non-confrontational as possible. I try to be like, this was my experience. Never trying to demonize anyone for their deeply held spiritual beliefs, because you have those for whatever reason. I take issue when those deeply held spiritual beliefs turn into policy, turn into actions where you say someone is less than. Like, if you want to believe Jesus is Lord, great for you. But you say because of that, you have the right to legislate someone's morality, or, say someone can't do something with their body, or say these people who love each other can't get married. That's where it's like, no, that's not cool. And, since then, would I call myself an atheist? No, but I wouldn't call myself necessarily a theist, or the outdoors for me has kind of become what my religion is. What I don't even call it religion. I don't even like that. Just what I find meaning and purpose in. I talked to some people. The best way to describe it is I'm a bit of a pantheist. I believe that everything is God or the divine. Some people, I've described my theology to some people. They say that's very close to Druidism, and I don't like putting label on it. And that could be my way, my way, an evolutionary sense of coping with what I've been through and dealing with things. I don't know, but that's just where I'm at. That's the very, very short version of 20 years of history there. But that's yeah.
Yeah, you go from this, here are all the answers. You have to have all the answers. This is the correct way. This is your morality. These are your ethics. This is literally brought down from heaven and told you what you're supposed to believe and how you're supposed to behave. And yeah, in 20 years, you find that you don't have to have all the answers. You're like, I don't have to have a label. And I love that outdoors has become not your God. I don't know how to say that, but has where you go to find meaning and purpose in life and whatever that feeling is that you get when you're out in nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those tingly feelings you used to get in a worship service, I feel those in the outdoors now. And I realize that's more of a biological response to grandeur and bigness or community. It's not the Holy Spirit filling you, because I get the same thing when I climb up top of a mountain. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this view. I discovered that's the same thing. And a lot of it's emotions and adrenaline and chemicals and just things that your body is wired to do by evolution or by whatever, however that's supposed to work.
Yeah. For me, that was part of me leaving Christianity, was starting to realize that a lot of the things that I used to think were sinful problems were just physiological stuff that I could deal with eating differently or doing yoga or calming my nervous system. Whereas like you were saying with your kids, the church spiritualizes everything. So then when there are actually biological things that can help, or pharmacological, I'm not even sure I'm saying that word right, these things that can be helpful, they're not even options for us.
Yep.
So you go hiking, what are some of the things that evokes inside of you, like you were saying with the biological? Where are some of your places you like to go? And
gosh, I love to go anywhere where I feel smaller.
Wow.
I live 2 hours from the Redwood National Park, in Northern California. I'm in Southern Oregon, 2 hours from there. 7 of the 10 largest trees in the world are there, and just to go and stand in front of a tree that's this tree was supposedly here when Jesus was here.
Wow.
And it's the size of a house, just width wise, and then it goes up and you can't see the top of it. Or go to from there you can go to the ocean, climb up to the top of a plateau. We have the Taylor Rock Plateaus here, or any of the mountains or peaks, bodies of water. I just love hiking by the Rogue River here in Southern Oregon, or go up north to the Willamette River or the Columbia River Gorge. Those places where I'm just wow. And as a part of that, as just as a plus size person, dealing with things like fat phobia and size discrimination, and being an advocate for that for so many people, is realizing in the outdoors, bigger is better, and it's okay to take up space. And then for the first time in my life, having been big my whole life, having dealt with eating disorders, I've been diagnosed with an eating disorder, having found out part of that eating disorder was because of the toxic way my family dealt with food, but also I had celiac disease and I was undiagnosed for 34 years. So the way my body treated food, my mind was just messed up, because food was literally killing me, but I was always hungry. That's a whole other story. But having dealt with that my whole life and going out and feeling small, a sense of smallness for me is just wow. And just in the grand scape of the universe, I'm significant, but at the same time, look at all this. This is just epic and amazing. And it's that feeling of feeling small for me is just, it's like none other.
Is hiking and being out in nature, is that more of an independent thing, or have you found in real life community to share it with? Or
I have, and I've been honestly very hesitant to get too plugged into communities. There's a group that I'm friends with the founder, Unlikely Hikers, which is an anti-racist, pro-LGBTQ, pro-size organization that encourages everybody to get outdoors. Founded by Jenny Brusso. She is amazing. We become close friends, and that group we've done group hikes together here in Southern Oregon and Portland and Salt Lake, and to get with other people who don't look like typical hikers. Which, when you think of hikers, you think of the dude in the Mountain Dew commercial. He's ripped, doesn't wear a shirt. He jumps off a cliff, catches the Mountain Dew in midair. That's what you think of. Whereas the outdoors are for everybody, and the outdoors have healing properties for every person. And not just white dudes with ripped abs, white straight dudes with ripped abs. And so that Unlikely Hikers has been a huge community. My online community has been great, but I've been honestly hesitant to get involved with communities just because being burned by the church and then getting involved in the ex-evangelical community for a while, and that was just found out how toxic that was for me. I'm very hesitant of community. Like what I do is also very lonely, because now having this platform, I can't, in the outdoor spaces or even in the Northwest and in parts of California, I can't go anywhere without like someone recognizing me. And it's like, okay, does this person genuinely want to be my friend, or they just like me because I'm that dude from the hiking video?
Yeah.
I've had issues where I've gone on a hiking trail and people saw me and they took my video and picture and posted it without me knowing. Like, oh, I saw the hiking guy. What? And my kids were with me, and I'm like, that's not cool. So I've learned things like, don't post my location till I'm gone, stuff like that. Safety stuff that you didn't have to think about, when you're just, on Instagram, look, a waterfall, cool, I'll snap it and post it. It's like, no, we got to wait 12 hours before we post this. So I've been very hesitant, and a lot of it because, I was really burned by the church community. It's very lonely. What I do is a very lonely, job. I have people around me who help me manage things, but it's been hard trying to find community. It is difficult, especially when I don't live in a big town. I don't want to live in a big town. I grew up in Southern California, Las Vegas. I love where I live now. I love the community here. But I know for me, that's just something that I have to work through and find people I trust. Because when you leave the church, you have always this built-in community. So I go from church to church to church, in ministry. You go to the church, everybody you have this built-in automatic community. Like, people are just there, and they're automatically your friends because you're both Baptist or evangelical or Christian. You're just supposed to be friends, and that isn't always great because you have people who not necessarily are compatible, trying to force relationships or friendships that don't work. And the second I left, after being burned so hard, all those friends, lifelong friends from high school who, I surrounded myself with Christians in high school and then, college years, they're gone. Like, I can count the number of people who still have contact with me, hundreds of people on one hand. And it's very just cordial contact. It's not like, deep lasting friendships. So it's just been, it's been difficult. I'm 40 years old now, and it's like, how do you make friends when all the friendships you grew and cultivated with in high school and college and through your 20s and 30s, you're an apostate now. They want nothing to do with you. And they're taught that, I came from a little bit of a reformed culture, Calvinistic. So either they're like, well, he was never really Christian, he was a liar, or, he'll eventually come back. So either people are just, I'm an apostate, or any conversation they have with me is trying to win me back to the Lord, which I just, my DMs are filled with that right now. So I don't want to deal with that.
Oh, no, not at all. At least for me, it often feels dismissive. I'm like, you're not even hearing what I'm saying, or you're not even seeing the person in front of you. You're seeing the person I used to be, or the person you hope I'm going to be. And I'm like, no, let's just have a conversation. And I have one or two friends that, I have very some super progressive Christian friends that back when I was a good Calvinist would not believe that they were actual Christians. But those kind of people, I can keep those in my life. Our values are still similar, all that. And then I have one or two, I guess, more conservative, theologically conservative friends that I can talk to a little bit. But yeah, it's like, just talk to me, like just hear me, just hear my story. And then it's extra icky if you're in, your DMs are filled with people who don't know you at all and are trying to tell you what you need to believe.
Yeah. One reel I posted in July, just about, I'm walking towards the ocean, just talking about the subject, about the loneliness of not having friends. Somehow in the last 3 weeks, that reel has hit the Christian Instagram from months ago.
Oh.
And it's gone from like 100,000 views to almost 1 million. And DM after DM requests of three basic responses of, hey, don't give up on the Lord. Hey, I'd love to chat with you sometime. To you're going to hell. To you were never really a Christian. And it's like, wow, how loving. Like, really? And you're not like the post wasn't even for them. It was just me expressing where I was at. And hoping to encourage others, which it has. I've gotten plenty of DMs from people who said, yeah, I left. I'm deconstructing. I'm dealing with the same thing, but I'm just either someone to be shunned or someone to be won to them. And I hate that because, I actively tried to not be that way for so long in the evangelical church. I wanted to see people for who they were. I didn't want to see people as a prize to be won. I didn't want to close the deal to get them to say a prayer to accept Jesus in their heart. And that's why I think my youth groups were filled with such a variety of teenagers, because they just felt welcome and valued. And that's what I wanted. And my attitude then was like, if they choose, if I'm really going to stick to my theology at the time, very somewhat Calvinistic, if Jesus so chooses to impress on their heart, he'll win them. And that was just my attitude. I'm just going to love people for who they are and let Jesus do what Jesus does. Which I think actually served me in realizing like, oh, wow, I'm missing a whole lot here. I'm missing a whole lot of different experiences, and my lived experiences as straight, cisgendered, white, Protestant pastor, kid of Protestant pastor kids, male, privileged, is totally different from what all these kids are experiencing. Is they're coming to youth group and their parents have kicked them out of the house because they came out. They're dealing with gender issues. They're dealing with economic issues. Mom can't pay the rent and things like that. Dad left. I'm like, wow, my eyes were just opened to so many different experiences. And I just it's eye opening, and it was very, I don't know, it's been a journey. Yeah.
Do you have advice for people who are like, I need awe and wonder, and I want that, the feeling that I used to have in church? Like, not how do you get that in nature, because then you're just like trying to make nature do a thing for you, but like, how do people get started just like being free like that, I guess?
Therapy? I mean.
Oh, nice. Yes. No, please. Therapy. Yes.
I'm a huge advocate for mental health. It's a huge part of my platform. I had to really kind of look at myself, and therapy forced me to do that. And a good therapist is not going to give you the answers. A good therapist is going to ask you the right questions about yourself. And going to therapy, and dealing with these questions of, existential dread, and, dealing with questions of having to forgive myself for things I said and preached from the pulpit that were just wrong and horrendous and homophobic and chauvinistic and borderline racist, if not full on racist. Like, it's just like, oh my God, I used to say these things. I used to believe these things. Or even when times where I didn't necessarily believe them, as I was slowly deconstructing, which was a slow process, I would say them just to make the church happy. Cause like, oh, I know that this line's a crowd pleaser. I'll say that, and everybody will, I'll preach on hell. And even though I was really kind of on the fence about what hell was and this and that at the time, I'll preach on it, and I'll get a lot of amens and hoops and hollers. And I did, just because I want to keep my job, And so therapy really was helpful in finding that. The outdoors may not be that thing for you. It could be, another aspect for me is creativity, going out, movies, films, cinema. It's a huge part. Storytelling. That could be what it is for you. That's kind of secondary for me. And I've definitely, my username online is Andy Films and Hikes for a reason. I love those two things. But really discovering who you are, you peel back, all the religion, all those old experiences, what's left, and then you got to rebuild that. That's why the term deconstructing has been termed. You're deconstructing your faith, and you figure out, who am I and what is it I believe, and then you can begin to build that back up, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, getting to do this, interviewing people, hearing people's stories, like, it's amazing how people find meaning and purpose and love and awe and wonder and community. Like, all the things that the church teaches us, they have cornered the market. This is where you get these things.
Yep.
And then people leave and they're like, actually, yeah, it takes some work to find some of these things, but like, actually, it's just people helping and loving other people and creating those spaces to find those things, and nature. Oof. Yes. I don't know. I guess I was just trying to say that, like, it's beautiful seeing how many different ways people are able to find all the things that we were once told. You can only find this in church.
Yeah. And the church doesn't have a monopoly on truth. The church doesn't have a monopoly on community or, big life-changing experiences, but they'd like to, from my experience, that's what they told me. In deconstructing, I visited some more, liberal churches, some Universalist, Unitarian, and some UCC churches, which were great. And to see there were Christians who, they did the traditional Christian things, sung hymns, did the stuff, but then like to hear like the pastor from the pulpit say, yeah, this part of the story, David, when David and Bathsheba, the Bible doesn't address the fact that David was basically a murderer and a rapist, and he was actually kind of a bad guy, and he probably had homosexual relationships too. And this is all stuff that they don't teach you, and we need to look at this for what it is, and realize that David wasn't perfect. He wasn't. We say he's a man after God's own heart, and just things I never heard. Like, wait, David was probably gay. Wait, you're talking about Jonathan? Wait, what? Wait, but he had to do that with Bathsheba, and what? And just all this, like, wow. Like, and just hear people say, I believe in the Bible, but the Bible isn't inerrant. Like, okay. And use like literary criticism and things, like to look at the Bible critically in the time it was written and who wrote it. And that the person did Moses really write the Torah? No, probably not. Was Moses even real? We don't know. Just like to hear those things, like, oh my gosh. And, for me, I can't be a liberal UCC Christian just because there's just so much triggering stuff in there. And for me, I was taught for so long the Bible is inerrant, and then to go to a point where I'm like, this is true, like these concepts are true, but this isn't true. The Bible says, homosexuality is an abomination, but not really, things like that. I just can't split those hairs. So for me, it was just like, I can't do it. You guys are awesome. I love that you're loving people. I love that, like, the church I was going to for a few months, they're marching in the Pride Parade. This is great. I love that you're doing this. I love that there's moms out there that says, I'm a church mom who has a gay son, and I'm willing to give you a hug if your mom's, stuff like that. Like, that's great. And I love that you're doing it. I just can't do that because it's too difficult for me to make those theological leaps and to be constantly triggered. They'll be singing hymns and hymns I know, but they change the words, which is great. But still, for me, that hymn, Old Rugged Cross, and you've changed the lyrics, it means something else to me. There's times where they did invitationals and walk down the aisles and repentance things in my Southern Baptist church where they sang that song, and I'm like, bad stuff. Can't do it.
Yeah.
That was a whole other tangent. Sorry.
No, that's a great tangent because, lots of people are still in the church. Lots of people are still like there's Tim Whitaker of the New Evangelicals. There's Jamar Tisby, these different people who are like trying to help white evangelicalism stop being the most terrible thing that it is, trying to help. One of my best friends, very liberal church. They were in the Pride Parade. They had a booth at the festival. They are trying to make their religion as kind and loving and good and like all the things as possible. I'm with you though. I'm all the way to the point where I really don't think there are gods and goddesses. Like, I don't think any of that stuff is real. However, I'm like, if you're doing that, that's fabulous. I got tired of being the like person who had to decide whether this in the Bible was true or is it an allegory, or I was just like, I can't. And either you take all of it or it just got to be too much. So I very much understand that feeling of like, especially like you talked about literary criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, it's a poem, but that poem in Psalms was the reason I was pro-life and pro like birth at or like life at conception for so long. And I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked? Like you did fantastic with your story. And I'm like, what else do we have?
I think for me, I want to touch on just being the slow process of me deconverting, whatever you want to call it. It was so gradual that I didn't even see it was happening. And it started before I was even like full time at a church. I was in Las Vegas and I was working part time at a church as a children's pastor. And this was back in 2000, I want to say 5. Very much for the Lord, but I was also working part time at Starbucks because I needed health insurance. And I remember I was closing the store with two other Starbucks employees. One of them I had a car, other one had a car, and the supervisor didn't have a car, and he was going to take the bus home. It was raining in Las Vegas, which doesn't happen. It was pouring, and it was probably late winter. And he's about to get on the bus, and I'm like, dude, I'll take you home. Sweet. His name was Jamar. And he knew I was a children's pastor, and he was an openly gay black dude. And, at this point, I'm just like, I'm going to love him to Jesus, and he'll turn away from his gay ways and, all this crap, trying to be a liberal Christian, like I'm going to engage with the gay community, and they're going to see their ways, and he's just going to love women, stupid stuff. And I remember we're driving, and he said, hey, can you swing by Carl's Jr. real quick? I can get some dinner before I get to my apartment. And his apartment was not in a great part of town. I'm like, hey, you take the bus here every day? Because I used to take the bus before I had a car. I'm like, that's like an hour and a half, 2 hour bus ride, one way every day. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, that sucks, dude. And so we get to the parking lot. It's raining. He's like, hey, Andy, I used to be like you. And like, we couldn't be any different. This is a black dude who lives in, a not so good part of town. He's gay. Like, we couldn't be any more different. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, so I wanted to be a pastor for, a long time. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, grew up in the black church, grew up in church. I was like an intern for my pastor. He was training me up. I was learning all kinds of stuff, but I was dealing with what I called at the time, same-sex attraction. And that's what he called it at the time. I was dealing with same-sex attraction. And I tried everything. I read all the books. I was trying to pray it away, and it wouldn't go away. So I went to my pastor, and his pastor essentially shunned him, said, you are an abomination. You are not allowed here. His family shunned him, said, no, we don't want any part of you. You come back when you're not gay anymore. And he's like, wow. I so badly just wanted to serve God, serve Jesus. I wanted to do this, but I couldn't because of who I was. And for the first time in my life, I realized, my gosh, like, he's not choosing to be gay, or he doesn't need to just repress, same-sex attraction. Like, this is a part of who he is. And you saw the tears in his eyes, and like, I was like, oh my gosh. And from that point forward, it was just this, okay, I need to keep more of an open mind about things. And it was just a slow, like, I'm seeing things from other perspectives, when the church champions like bathroom bills and stuff like that. I'm like, is that really the best thing? Like, should we be worrying about that? Like, and I so much of my deconstruction I take back to that car ride in Las Vegas with Jamar, and just to see humanity in someone's face who wanted to be a part of the church, who wanted to serve God, but was told you are an abomination. And that really set me on a path, for the next, 15 years of really kind of looking at my faith and the way I treated people very critically, and realizing, okay, the Bible says this, but practically that doesn't work out. Or these two things, the Bible, as much as you try with hermeneutics and other things to make them work together, they just don't. I'm putting one and one together and I keep getting three, and that doesn't work. That can't be true. And it was that point in my life where, I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm reading and I'm start reading, more, liberal Christians like, oh my gosh, I got a Rob Bell book. People are freaking out. Like,
Ooh.
yeah, I know, crazy. Back when, after Rob Bell said there was no hell and everybody, burned his books. And just that path I was on, to where it's like, I voted for Obama like the first time he ran. Didn't tell anybody, kept it on the down low. The second time I voted for him, and then I had posted online after he clearly won on my Facebook page. I posted, all people in my church follow me. Said, it doesn't matter who the president is, Jesus is still king. Basically saying, guys, quit it. Don't worry about it. The church was angry because they thought that was a blatant, like, did he vote for Obama? So I was in my pastor's office for 2 hours the day after the election, him trying to get me to say who I voted for, and I wouldn't say it. And a few weeks prior, while he was out of town, I had actually preached about, us loving the community and loving others and showing love to everyone. And I had said a statement in that sermon that I'm all about social justice, meaning that, we need to, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, stuff that Jesus, the Gospels clearly say you're supposed to do. Like, these are good things. And yes. I use that word social justice, and the deacons were up in arms. Like, so he voted for Obama, and he's all about, social justice. And I tried to explain what that meant, and, and slowly just that reaction I got. And then, I go to the church, back in Oregon, and it's like, skinny jeans, tattoos, we accept everybody except my children who have adopted from foster care, who have been abused in every way possible before coming into our home. They have these mental health issues, which we're still dealing with today. We're still trying to get them treatment for. And they're saying we need to pray it away. And just slowly, it was just a slow process of, and then it all just, crap at the fan eventually. And then I was like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And I say all that just to say, it really is a process. Because I was in that community and there was so much trauma bonding for me with the church, because that's what got me through a very traumatic childhood, that I had to really see for what it was. And that's not to say, I always tell people, I'm never going to down on you for your deeply held spiritual beliefs. I am not going to tolerate if those deeply held spiritual beliefs impede on the rights or humanity of somebody else. And that's where I draw the line. Like, no, it's not going to happen. You believe in Jesus, great. You believe in the literal resurrection. You believe the Bible's inerrant, great. Don't put that on me or anyone else.
Yes. David, the main host, he just talks about like it's death by 1,000 cuts. There's rarely in a story where it's like, here, sometimes there's this big thing that happens and you're like, I'm done. But usually you look back and you're like, there's a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And yeah, it's slowly just, people have often said they just came to realize, I don't think I believe this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And, and it flies in the face with, and I don't know if you may have had this where people are like, you set out to leave. And it's like, no, like I was just either living life or trying to make this work for me. And then all of a sudden I'm like, actually, this isn't working for me.
Yeah. I've had the same thing happen where people say, oh, Andy left to pursue a career in the entertainment industry because he was lured away by devil, or, he left to go back to school and he went to Southern Oregon University is seen as like Satan. He went to a Bible college, but then he went to a liberal atheist college, and then, he got pulled away that way. Or now, because, I'm a full-time influencer, Andy just wants fame and fortune, and, he was lured away by, the things of social media and the things of this world. And I'm like, they always try to make excuses. I'm like, no, it was death by 1,000 cuts. It was a slow, just like, I can't, and you get to the point you're like, I just don't believe this anymore. And that was a strange realization, being, at Southern Oregon University, being in a film class where I am in a group of, students, my first interactions with the trans community was at Southern Oregon University. I had never had any interactions with having people in my group. We're making film together who are trans, who are LGBTQ, who are Black, who are people I just didn't normally rub shoulders with, and having a great time doing it. And I just realized, like, I'm not a Christian. Like, it's just this realization, just like sitting in this group and we're filming stuff, and I'm just looking around. I'm like, I'm not a Christian. Like, I wouldn't. It wasn't this grand, huge theological realization. It's just like, yep, I can't do it, and this isn't me, and this can't be true. And the theologian in me, having gone to Bible college, I'm always trying to figure out more things, and I'm reading things and discovering more things. Like, oh yeah, this is where it doesn't line up. And I think the biggest thing for me, was the realization that, if Jesus, Jesus's death had enough power to save me, but doesn't have enough power to save everybody. Like, that doesn't work for me. Like, if Jesus' death, blood, and resurrection can save me, and I can choose to reject that, that means I have more power than Jesus, if that makes any sense. It's like, that doesn't compute. Like, or does it compute? Like, if Jesus is all powerful and his death is the end all, why couldn't he just save me? I'm choosing to reject that. So, and then things about free will, and I'm just like, it was just like, no, this doesn't work. And I'm getting off on a tangent here.
Well, I mean, it takes so many mental gymnastics to make all of the things work. And it's just like, at some point, it's like, one of the women who've been on the podcast before, she's in our Facebook group, and she said, I was Calvinist. Apparently God never chose to save me. So now I'm just going to, I don't have a choice in this. And she's like, I'll just continue with that. When people ask, she's like, well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which Calvinists truly aren't Calvinists in and of themselves.
Oh, no.
They aren't. It's, yeah. And I also was a Mark Driscoll stan for a while. So there was that. Yeah. Which was also part of my, when he went down with the whole William Wallace II thing, that was also part of my deconstruction. Like, oh, this guy I idolized, who had been to the Acts 29 conferences, and was like, oh gosh, that's not very Christian. He's in Seattle. We were thinking like, oh, he's more of a liberal Christian. No, he wasn't. He was ESV toting, hellfire and brimstone guy who's still preaching now in Scottsdale. It's great.
Yep. Yeah. My little feminist heart my blood starts to boil, because I just think about the pastors who can do pretty much anything, and they'll just find a different pastorate. They'll just go somewhere else, and they will get hired again.
That's one of those instances where I wish I would have listened to my wife, because I was going to be a church planner through Acts 29. And my wife went to the pastor's wife thing, and she's like, this isn't good. I'm like, oh, you just need to learn to be, I'm such an ass. Listen to those other pastors' wives and be more submissive and this and that, which, my wife and I, we've never had a traditional, gender role relationship. She's always taken more of the more male traditional role in our marriage and relationship and our parenting. And I've always taken more of the female traditional role in our marriage and parenting relationship. It's just how it's worked for us. And that's how our attitudes are. We did like the love and respect marriage conference thing. And it's like, no, I actually require more love, and she requires more respect. This doesn't work. Like, this gender role thing just doesn't compute with us. So, yeah.
Well, yes, Love and Respect is a book. We will use that as a segue into, do you have any not that recommendations that have been helpful to you in your deconstruction? Books, podcasts, YouTube, anything?
Gosh, there really, it's been a bit of a struggle. I've only found one book. There's been so many just different resources and things that I've turned to and looked at, but I find myself going down a rabbit hole, because the algorithms are good at this, of just watching more and more and getting myself more depressed and getting myself more, anxious and angry. And I just don't want that. I don't want to be the angry ex-evangelical. I don't want to be that guy. And I understand that for so many people, that is a stage you have to go through. It's a stage of grieving. You're going to be angry. I was that guy for a long time. And that's fine. I just don't want to be that anymore because I didn't like who I was becoming. But one book, I got it right here. This is by a hiker friend of mine who's hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. I hope I was wrong about Eternal Damnation, a true memoir. Tim Mathis is a friend of mine. He's a hiker. He's also written a book about hiking, The Dirtbag's Guide to Life, Eternal Truth for Hiker Trash, Ski Bums and Vagabonds. This has been just very helpful. Just telling his story as another outdoors person. It's been great. He's been on my podcast, the Hiker Podcast, which is now the Adventurers Out There podcast. And we just thought we commiserate about our experiences in the evangelical world. And that has been super, super helpful. But yeah, there hasn't, I've listened to a lot of other podcasts and other things, and really, the most help, this is going to sound so weird. The most helpful piece of media in my deconstruction has actually been the movie version of Donald Miller's book, Blue Like Jazz.
I didn't know there was a movie. I knew the book, but it was off limits because I was a good Calvinist and didn't read those crazy liberals.
Yes, he talked about Mark Driscoll, the cussing pastor, and all that. But there was a movie which was and it talked about how Donald came from a Southern Baptist Texas upbringing, and he goes up to Portland, Oregon, goes to a liberal school after suffering some trauma from his church, and the process of deconstruction, and kind of leaves you hanging whether or not he's really a Christian at the end or not. But just for me, that piece of media, just seeing that, and, from my own experience leaving Southern Baptist, church to more liberal church, going to Oregon, it was very helpful just seeing the struggle and the existential dread. And I go back to that movie a lot, and I don't know why. I find comfort in it, and I relate a lot with that story. The movie has changed a lot from the book. The book it's really a series of, Blue Like Jazz is really a series of essays, whereas the book's really a series of essays, whereas the movie is more of a one continual memoir or narrative. Mm-hmm. So that he takes from those. And a lot of liberties are taken, but yeah, that piece, I don't know what it is, and it's hard to find. I actually ended up buying a copy just because it's really hard to find now on streaming or anything else. And I wouldn't endorse Donald Miller as an author or person at this point in my life, based on what I've seen from him online. Also, just another person who I've just, even though it can be very problematic, Joshua Harris, and what he posts online. He's one of the few ex-Christians I follow. Back in my very active Twitter days, we actually had some dialogue. He started following me for a while, and even though he's done some pretty problematic things, about trying to monetize deconstructing, but just seeing this person who I held on a pedestal at age 19 when he was only 21.
Yeah.
And you hear a story, it's like he was thrust into this and not minimizing the responsibility he needs to take for his own actions, but just seeing what he went through on a huge grand scale. I'd seen him speak probably a dozen times. He was a Southern Baptist darling, and he's just doing his thing now, trying to figure out, him and his wife separated amicably, and he's up in Canada trying to do his thing. Just seeing that, wow, someone like him, who I held on this pedestal, who I based my entire pre-marriage relationship with my wife upon his teachings, and he couldn't do it. It just gives me comfort, a lot. Yeah, and I'm not saying both Donald Miller and Joshua Harris, there's some problematic things. There's definitely trigger warning there and other things, but just I relate in a lot of ways. Knowing these guys, these champions of evangelicalism, they fell hard in the eyes of the church, and makes me feel like, wow, they really don't have it figured out, and it gives me comfort, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. There's sometimes that I'm like, I would love to just sit down with Beth Moore, Jen Hatmaker, just different women who've just been like, butchered all over the place, and just be like, how are you doing? What's going on? Like, like how are you? What's life like these days? So I get it.
Beth Moore is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
You've met Beth Moore? Oh, I'm jealous.
I was at a conference, and our church van got stuck in the mud after a rainstorm. A bunch of us stuck, and she came out there and started talking. How can I help y'all? And the nicest person I literally have ever met. Like, and yeah, what she's been through, what she's had to go through. I'm like, wow, that's and this was back in 2003. Mm-hmm. But anyways, how can people find me? Follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Andy Films and Hikes, or on YouTube at Andy Films and Hikes. Mostly outdoor and body confidence content. I do occasionally post about when I'm in the mental state to do it. I post about my journey in faith. I try to be very careful about it, just because it invites a lot of conflict, and invites a lot of people who just want to argue. If I turn the comments off on those kind of posts, the DMs are even more so. So I'm just like,
oh yeah.
So my hope is with this particular podcast that I can share my story and be like, because I get asked all the time, oh, why don't you tell me your story? I'm like, here, you listen to this, and you can hear my story.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, that's the best way to find me: Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at Andy Films and Hikes.
Yay! Well, Andy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed this. This was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
My final thoughts on the episode. I've been following Andy since I got back on Instagram. Like, he just popped up in my reels. It was his going for a stupid hike for my stupid mental health reel. And it was just fantastic. And his body positivity, his anti-diet culture stuff, like all these different things, just getting out in nature. Nature's for everyone, like all these things. I was like, wow, all this resonates with my little heart. And then to know where he's had to come from to get to where he is now, in terms of loving himself, seeing nature, and being able to just have the awe and wonder, and that whatever that experience is that you get whenever you're out in nature, when you're, like he said, when you're around something that's so much bigger than yourself. You don't have to go into the supernatural world to find it. Like, it's right here on this planet. Oh, I just love it. I just love it all. One of the things that stood out to me is us in the ex-evangelical, ex-religious world. We've got to have our feelings, because that's reality. We've got to go through whatever parts of, stages of grief that we need to whenever we've lost something. We've got to have the feelings, yes, but we cannot be like a toxic community where people can't come, and where it's just anger and meanness. I'm very thankful for the Facebook group, because it isn't like that. But yeah, there's a lot of just anger at the church. And when you find your people online to be angry with, it can keep going. It can escalate. But yeah, we can't be that, because not everybody needs that. We've got to figure out how to deal with our junk and make space for anger, because yes, we have to have it. But I guess not just sit there and stew. Andy, I'm so glad that you're out and you're finding all the things that you needed to find. You're able to find it in nature and your life now. It's fabulous, y'all. Like, getting out of religion. They told us that these things can only be found in religion. It's not true. It's just flat out not true. Community, love, solid relationships, awe, wonder, like all of these things can be found outside of religion. It's true.
The Secular Grace thought of the week, inspired by Andy, is accepting your body. Within the Christian bubble, the idea of the flesh being evil, I think, extends to the rejection of our bodies, whichever shape, size, or form it takes. A part of secular grace is accepting oneself, and that includes our humanity as well as our physicality, who we are embodied. And what is inspiring about Andy's story is not being limited by our bodies, but experiencing nature, being outdoors. Until next time, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast network.